They say betrayal comes in many forms, but none cuts deep in the one dealt by people you loved, trusted, and thought were on your side. I learned that lesson the hardest way imaginable. My name is Ethan Marshall. I'm 42 years old. I'm a man forged in silence, built on discipline and a relentless calm that served me through every battle, whether on the field of my early years or in the boardrooms and data centers of my corporate empire. I'm not a man who wears emotions on his sleeve or rushes into anger. I believe every move must be deliberate, every reaction measured. That's how I survived when everything was at stake. But nothing could have prepared me for the storm I was about to face. Nothing could have readied me for the crushing blow of discovering that the two people I trusted most, my wife Serena and my closest friend Marcus Kane, had spent years weaving a web to destroy me. They weren't just cheating me of affection or loyalty. They wanted to erase me, my children, my fortune, my very name. I was never a man who took things at face value. For years, I built my life like a fortress, carefully securing every piece of my empire, every relationship, every secret. I had an instinct for patterns, for reading between the lines, honed by decades of experience in security, consulting, and intelligence analysis. And yet, the signs were subtle at first. Serena changed slowly, almost imperceptibly. The late-night phone calls, the hushed whispers when I walked into a room, the sudden disappearance on business trips she refused to explain. I told myself it was a strain of success, the stress of running her own startup alongside managing our family. But deep down, something told me otherwise. Then came the night I found the folder. I wasn't looking for evidence or proof. I was tracking some irregularities in our company's financial reports, small discrepancies that didn't add up. When I logged into Serena's laptop for a quick check, I saw it, an encrypted folder named simply Project Eclipse. A name so mundane it almost fooled me. But I had tools, and more importantly, patience. I cracked it open. Inside were plans, cold calculated and damning. Emails between Serena and Marcus laid bare the conspiracy. They had been moving assets, setting up shell companies, drafting legal documents to strip me of custody of our children, Olivia and Mason, and to transfer all our properties and business holdings into their control. They'd even gone so far as to forge my signature on some contracts. Watching it all unfold was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, but there was no escape. The worst part? Marcus, the man I'd trusted since college, who I called brother. He was the architect behind much of this betrayal. The man who'd been by my side through every major milestone. The man who'd laughed with me, celebrated my wins, and shared in my losses. Now, he was the poison in my blood. But if they thought this would break me, they were wrong. Because I'd spent a lifetime preparing for moments like this. My entire career was built on anticipating threats no one else saw. I was a silent guardian of Fortune Corp, a security consultancy firm that protected some of the biggest names in the country from cyber attacks, insider leaks, and hostile takeovers. I lived in the shadows of corporate warfare, and this was no different. As the pieces clicked into place, I retreated to my sanctuary, my basement office, the space where I spent hours poring over code, monitoring systems, and strategizing moves. Now, it became the war room for my silent battle. The hum of the servers was the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet. Screens flickered with surveillance footage I'd managed to extract from Serena's devices. Footage of secret meetings with lawyers, late-night rendezvous with Marcus, and transactions that told the story words never could. Her laughter, once music to my ears, now twisted my mind, a soundtrack to betrayal. Her confidence wasn't the woman I married. It was a mask of a player in a game she thought she controlled. I sifted through everything, bank statements, email threads, phone records. I found forged documents, altered contracts, and even fake custody evaluations designed to paint me as an unfit father. It was a meticulous plan to wipe me from my children's lives and leave me with nothing. But I wasn't about to let that happen, not without a fight. I took a deep breath, recalling the training that had defined me. Years in military intelligence had taught me the power of patience and precision. Rage was for amateurs. I needed strategy. So I began to compile my own dossier, a file that would hold every secret, every lie, every crime they thought they buried beneath a veneer of wealth and respectability. There was no turning back. I remember the early days of our marriage, back when Serena's eyes sparkled with dreams and ambition, and I was a man trying to carve a life of stability from chaos. We met at a charity gala, her grace and sharp mind instantly catching my attention. We moved fast. Too fast, some said, but I believed in her. I wanted to believe. We had Olivia and Mason 3 years in, the two most precious parts of my life. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Serena's company flourished, and I balanced it all with my work, often late nights, endless meetings, ensuring our empire grew. But beneath the surface, the cracks had begun. Subtle changes in Serena's demeanor, secretive calls, meetings she'd never explain. I tried harder. More dinners with family, weekend baseball games, bedtime stories. I became the father and husband I vowed to be, even if my nights ended alone in that basement office, battling shadows most people never saw. But it wasn't enough. By 2022, the distance was undeniable. Serena was colder, distant, wrapped up in her new world of power players and investors. Marcus was no longer just a friend. He was the man behind the curtain, pulling strings. And then came the final blow. The night I discovered the custody papers she'd filed, listing fabricated evidence to paint me as unstable. They wanted everything. That's when I stopped being a victim. I wasn't the man they thought I was. I was a storm waiting to break. I started reaching out discreetly. Former contacts from my intelligence days, private investigators, legal advisors, quietly assembling a team to expose their lies and take back what was mine. The game was no longer theirs. It was mine, and I intended to win. The days that followed the discovery of Serena's betrayal were a study in controlled chaos. I didn't scream. I didn't break down. Instead, I did what I'd always done. Calculated every move, weighed every risk, and prepared for the long game. My first priority was to secure my children, Olivia and Mason. The thought of losing them was unbearable, but I knew a bitter custody battle would be fought not in courtrooms, but in whispers and documents. I needed proof. Evidence that could dismantle Serena's carefully crafted lies. I revisited every detail of our life together, retracing moments others might overlook. Every photo, every message, every bank transfer, each was a piece in the puzzle. The forged custody evaluation, the fake reports of my alleged instability, they all had to be exposed. But this wasn't just a personal fight. It was a war on multiple fronts. My business, the company I'd built from the ground up, was vulnerable. Serena and Marcus had gained access to internal financials, siphoning funds, manipulating contracts. If I didn't act fast, I could lose everything. I contacted a trusted cybersecurity expert, someone I'd worked with during sensitive investigations. Within days, she was analyzing my company's systems, tracing back the breaches, and isolating the damage. Meanwhile, I began assembling a dossier of every illicit transaction I could find, hidden offshore accounts, unauthorized property sales, ghost employees siphoning salaries. But beyond the numbers and legal documents, there was a darker side to uncover. I dug into Marcus Kane's background, searching for anything that could be used to weaken his position. Old acquaintances, skeletons in closets, anything that might explain how the man I once trusted could turn so cold. What I found was a man driven by envy and greed, a stark contrast to the brotherly figure I believed him to be. The betrayal stung, but it also steeled me. I remember the nights during my military service when I faced enemies who wanted to break me. I had survived ambushes, interrogation, and betrayal. This was no different. Just another enemy hiding behind a mask. Each evening, as the house settled and the world outside quieted, I returned to my basement office. My sanctuary turned battleground. The hum of servers and blinking lights became the soundtrack to my planning. I wasn't fighting blindly. I was gathering intelligence, crafting responses, and preparing to strike. One particular night stands out. I was reviewing surveillance footage I'd managed to retrieve. Moments of Serena and Marcus in secret meetings, their expression smug, their plans unfolding like clockwork. It was infuriating to watch, but it was also a gift, a glimpse into their arrogance and overconfidence. They thought I was out of the game. They thought I was broken, but I was just getting started. I began discreetly reaching out to contacts from my past, journalists known for exposing corruption, private investigators with a knack for digging deeper, and legal experts ready to take on the powerful Harrisons, Serena's family. I was cautious. Any misstep could alert them, forcing them to tighten their grip or destroy evidence. I moved like a ghost, leaving no trace, sending encrypted messages, and using untraceable numbers. Every piece of information I gathered was added to my growing dossier, a weapon sharper than any sword. But as the evidence piled up, so did the pressure. Serena's attacks in the media were becoming more aggressive, painting me as a negligent father and failed husband. Marcus orchestrated smear campaigns, twisting facts and fabricating stories. The fight wasn't just legal, it was psychological. I had to remain unshaken. For Olivia and Mason, I couldn't afford a break. One evening, as I sat alone in the dim light, I thought back to the early days, before the betrayal, before the lies. I remembered the dreams Serena and I shared, the plans we made for a future that now seemed like a cruel joke. It fueled a fire within me, a determination not just to survive, but to reclaim everything they tried to steal. This was more than a battle for assets or custody. It was a fight for truth, for justice, for the family I refused to lose. And I was ready to wage war in the shadows, where they least expected. The weight of betrayal settled over me like a cold fog, relentless and suffocating. But I refused to let it consume me. Instead, I channeled it, every ounce of that pain, that shock, that raw anger, into a single, unwavering purpose: to fight, not recklessly, not with blind fury, but with the razor-sharp precision I had honed throughout my life. I had to be patient. I had to be smarter. It was clear Serena and Marcus underestimated the man they were trying to destroy. They believed that wealth and influence could silence me, that they could rewrite the story of my life without consequence. But they were about to learn how deeply rooted I was, and how far I was willing to go. I began by securing the fortress. My home, my company, my digital life. Every entry point became a battleground. I changed passwords, upgraded security protocols, and set traps to catch anyone who dared to breach my walls. It was a game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to be the mouse that became the predator. Simultaneously, I dug deeper into Serena's past and family ties. The Harrison name carried weight, political clout, legal influence, a web of connections that could bend rules and obscure truths. But every empire has cracks. I found whispers of impropriety, rumors of favors exchanged behind closed doors, documents sealed under layers of bureaucracy. My military training taught me that no secret is truly hidden forever. It's just waiting for the right eye to find it. The sealed family court documents from years ago, hinting at judicial corruption and a reckless accident covered up by powerful interests, became my spearhead. I had them scanned, cross-referenced, and prepared for release to contacts I trusted in investigative journalism and federal inquiry. The Harrisons might have power, but I had proof and patience. Yet, the battle was not just legal or digital. It was deeply personal. Every time I saw Olivia's bright eyes or Mason's eager smile, I felt the stakes grow heavier. I wasn't just fighting for money or status. I was fighting for my children's future, their identity, and the truth they deserved. That truth was buried beneath layers of lies Serena spun effortlessly. I remember the dinner she hosted with investors, the casual arrogance with which she dismissed my concerns, and the coldness in her gaze when she thought I wasn't watching. I once believed in that gaze. Now, it was a mask hiding a calculating adversary. Marcus, the traitor, was even more dangerous. His charm and charisma masked a ruthless ambition. While I was rebuilding, he was poisoning minds, spreading rumors to isolate me socially and professionally. He wanted me broken, silent, forgotten. But I had allies, people who believed in me, who had seen the man behind the scenes, the man who never quit, who always found a way. My network of former colleagues, legal experts, and loyal employees became my covert army. Every lead I pursued uncovered another layer of the conspiracy. Offshore accounts, fraudulent real estate transfers, and ghost companies used to launder money and siphon assets. Each discovery tightened the noose around Serena and Marcus's plans. One cold evening, as rain tapped against the windows of my study, I sat surrounded by files and screens. The blue glow illuminated a face I barely recognized, a man betrayed, yet unbroken. I knew the path ahead was dangerous. I knew there would be sacrifices, but retreat was never an option. The battle for my name, my children, and my future had begun in earnest, and I was ready to see it through, no matter the cost. The world I once knew was crumbling, but I refused to let it bury me. Every moment of betrayal, every lie woven around me, only fueled a fire that burned silently beneath my calm exterior. Serena and Marcus had made one fatal mistake, underestimating the man who thrived in shadows and storms. My days became a balancing act, juggling the relentless demands of legal battles, corporate warfare, and the fragile threads holding my family together. Every call, every email was laced with tension. Every smile I forced in front of Olivia, and Mason masked the turmoil raging beneath. But my resolve never wavered. I started by turning my home into a fortress, not just physically but emotionally. The walls that once echoed with laughter now guarded secrets and plans. I installed layers of security, cameras, encrypted networks, and safe rooms. It wasn't paranoia, it was necessity. Serena's reach was long, and Marcus was cunning. I had to stay one step ahead. Meanwhile, my team worked tirelessly. Cybersecurity experts traced financial manipulations, uncovering a web of deceit stretching across continents. Legal advisors dissected contracts and custody filings, preparing to expose every forgery and lie. Private investigators tracked movements, capturing proof of Serena and Marcus's covert meetings. One file stood out, a hidden ledger linking the Harrison family to illegal campaign donations and bribery scandals. It was a smoking gun, the thread that could unravel their carefully curated image of integrity. I fed this intel discreetly to investigative journalists known for exposing the untouchable. The political fallout was inevitable, but amidst the strategy and surveillance, my heart wavered. Olivia, just 8, clung to me with questions I couldn't fully answer. Mason, 6, looked to me for protection from a storm he couldn't see. I wrestled with guilt. How had I let this happen? How could I shield them from a betrayal so deep it threatened to erase their father from their lives? Sleep became a luxury. Nights blurred into dawns as I pored over documents and footage. Every secret meeting, every whispered plan, was logged and analyzed. Serena's confident facade cracked under scrutiny. I found inconsistencies in her stories, discrepancies in her finances. Marcus's charm couldn't mask the greed that drove him. I recalled the early days, our first meeting at the charity gala, the way Serena's eyes sparkled with ambition. We dreamed of building a legacy, a family, a future, but ambition had turned to avarice and love to cold calculation. One evening, as rain hammered the windows, I sat alone, the weight of the coming fight settling over me like a shroud. The dossier before me was thick, enough to topple empires. But power is a double-edged sword. Wielded recklessly, it could destroy everything I still held dear. I had to be meticulous. A phone call shattered the silence. It was Marcus. His voice, once warm and brotherly, was now icy and taunting. He warned me to stop digging, to walk away before I destroyed myself. But I only smiled, a quiet, bitter smile. They thought fear would make me bend. They were wrong. This war was more than legal papers and money. It was a battle for truth, for justice, for the family I refused to lose. I sent a secure message to my closest allies. The time to strike was near. And as I prepared for the coming storm, one thing was clear. They had underestimated the man they betrayed. The weight of the coming battle pressed against me every waking moment. Betrayal cuts deeper than any wound. It lingers in the silent spaces between words, in the shadows where trust once lived. Serena and Marcus weren't just foes. They were the architect of my undoing, and I was their target. But targets can fight back, and hunters can be hunted. I remember the morning I realized how far their deception ran. The sun filtered weakly through the blinds, casting long stripes of light across my desk. With the scattered files and encrypted hard drives told a story of greed and ambition far beyond what I had imagined. This was no impulsive act of betrayal. This was a meticulously planned campaign, a hostile takeover of my life. I was struck by a chilling thought. They didn't just want my wealth or my company. They wanted to erase me, remove me from my children's lives, strip me of my identity, and rewrite history to cast me as a villain. The idea was almost suffocating. I sat there, staring at a photo of Olivia and Mason, their innocent faces unaware of the storm raging around them. I made a silent vow then and there. They would never lose their father to lies and betrayal. My first step was securing their future. Custody battles are a battlefield where truth is weaponized and distorted. Serena had already filed documents laced with false accusations, claims of instability, neglect, and even fabricated incidents designed to paint me as unfit. I knew the stakes were high. Custody was more than a legal matter. It was a war for their hearts and minds. I began assembling a fortress of evidence to counter her claims. From school reports, doctors' notes, to testimonies from neighbors and family friends. Every piece of documentation was meticulously gathered to paint the truth of my devotion. I reached out to my closest confidants, friends who had witnessed my dedication as a father and husband. They were ready to stand by me, their voices a bulwark against Serena's lies. At the same time, my legal team worked tirelessly. We challenged every forged document, scrutinized every suspicious detail, and prepared to expose the depths of the deception. But legal battles are long and draining. I knew I had to win before the courtroom even convened. Parallel to the custody fight, the war for my company raged in silence. Serena and Marcus had covertly siphoned funds, manipulated contracts, and transferred assets into shell companies. The betrayal cut through the heart of my life's work. The security firm I had built from nothing. Losing it wasn't an option. I brought in experts, cybersecurity specialists who traced the financial bleed, forensic accountants who followed the money trail through offshore accounts and fraudulent transactions. Piece by piece, we closed off escape routes, seized control, and cut off the flow of stolen assets. Meanwhile, I kept digging into Marcus Kane's past. I needed to understand the man who'd become my enemy. Once my closest friend, Marcus was a brilliant strategist, charismatic and ruthless. But beneath the surface, he was driven by envy and ambition, a man who saw betrayal as a tool, not a crime. I uncovered old lawsuits, whispers of shady deals, and betrayals of others. It painted a portrait of a man who didn't hesitate to destroy anyone standing in his way, including me. The emotional toll was immense. Every day brought new challenges, new lies to uncover, new battles to fight. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of clarity. One night, alone in my office, the quiet was shattered by the ringing of my secure phone. It was a contact from the federal prosecutor's office, a result of the anonymous tip I'd sent weeks earlier. The sealed documents revealing judicial corruption involving Serena's family were under investigation. The balance was shifting, but with every victory came retaliation. Serena escalated her public attacks, hiring PR firms to smear my name, twisting facts, and painting me as unstable. Marcus orchestrated whispered campaigns to isolate me socially and professionally. Their reach was vast, yet I stood firm. In the quiet moments, I reflected on the man I was before this storm. The soldier, the strategist, the father who never gave up. That man was still here, and he was fighting back. The war was far from over, but for the first time in months, hope flickered, and I would hold on to it with everything I had. The days blurred into nights, and nights into an unrelenting storm of evidence gathering, planning, and sleepless hours. Every piece of the puzzle, no matter how small, mattered. The betrayal was bigger than I had imagined, woven deep into the fabric of my life by the two people I once trusted most. But there was no room for despair, only focus. Serena's campaign to rewrite our family story had begun in the shadows, but now it spilled into public arenas. Tabloids ran stories questioning my stability. Business partners called cautious and distant. Even some of my oldest friends hesitated, unsure what to believe. It was painful watching my world fracture, but I refused to let their lies define me. I dug deeper into the financial labyrinth Marcus and Serena had constructed. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, falsified contracts signed under aliases, property transfers under shell companies. I traced them all. Each discovery was a nail in their coffin, a step closer to exposing the truth. Yet, they adapted quickly. When we closed one loophole, another opened. Their network was vast, and they moved with ruthless efficiency. But I had an advantage they didn't anticipate: time. Patience had always been my greatest weapon. I turned to my old military contacts, calling in favors earned over years of service. Former intelligence operatives, analysts, and legal minds joined my cause. They brought expertise and perspective that cut through the haze of deception. Together, we began a quiet counteroffensive. I started leaking select pieces of evidence to trusted journalists, enough to spark suspicion, but not enough to expose my full hand. Public interest grew, and pressure mounted on the Harrisons. Behind the scenes, federal investigators reopened sealed files, questioning long-standing assumptions. At home, I fought to keep Olivia and Mason shielded from the chaos. I arranged for extra support at school and therapy sessions to help them cope with the changes. They deserved peace amid the storm, but peace was elusive. One evening, a threatening letter arrived, anonymous, but unmistakably from someone close to Serena's circle. The message was clear: stop digging or face consequences. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, but I didn't flinch. Fear had no place in this fight. Instead, I doubled down. I intensified surveillance, increased security around my family, and coordinated with law enforcement. I wasn't just defending my assets. I was protecting lives. Meanwhile, Serena's facade began to crack. In public, she remained composed, but behind closed doors, her confidence wavered. Whispers of infighting within the Harrison clan reached me. Marcus's impatience grew, and his reckless moves threatened to expose more than intended. I sensed the tide was turning. In a rare moment of solitude, I reflected on how far I'd come. The man betrayed, broken, and pushed to the edge had transformed into a relentless force. I was no longer a victim. I was a warrior, and warriors don't back down. With the pieces in place, the final phase of my plan began to take shape. The evidence was ready, the allies prepared, and the public intrigued. Soon, the truth would no longer be hidden. But battles like these demand sacrifices. I steeled myself for what was to come, knowing that the fight for my name, my children, and my future was far from over. Yet, for the first time in a long time, I believed victory was within reach. The fight had changed me, reshaped the contours of my life and my very being. What began as a personal betrayal had spiraled into a war for survival. Survival of my name, my dignity, my children, and the legacy I'd spent years building. Serena and Marcus weren't just adversaries. They were architects of chaos. Weaving a labyrinth of lies and manipulation, I was determined to unravel thread by thread. As the pressure mounted, I found myself living two parallel lives, one public, the other clandestine. By day, I maintained the facade of composed businessman navigating hostile waters. By night, I transformed into a strategist, a general commanding a covert operation. My office a war room bathed in the cold glow of screens and scattered files. The dossier I'd amassed was no longer just evidence. It was a manifesto, a testament to the duplicity of those I once called family. Each page revealed a new betrayal. Forged documents, illicit financial transfers, shadow companies siphoning my life's work. But perhaps the most damning were the ties to political corruption. The sealed family court documents exposing judicial influence peddling by the Harrisons, Serena's powerful kin. It was a dangerous game. The deeper I dug, the more enemies I made. Whispers of threats followed me like shadows. One evening, after a late meeting with federal investigators, I found my car vandalized, a chilling message scrawled across the hood: "Stop or suffer." But threats only sharpened my resolve. Olivia and Mason remained my anchor. Despite the chaos, their innocence reminded me why this fight mattered. I protected their world fiercely, shielding them from the storm I could not fully escape. Therapy sessions, trusted caregivers, and careful scheduling ensured their lives stayed as normal as possible. Yet, I feared what Serena's influence might do behind closed doors. The custody battle was looming. Serena's legal team, formidable and well-funded, sought to paint me as unstable and unfit. But I was prepared. Every piece of evidence countered their narrative. Witness statements, financial audits, school records, they all told a story of a devoted father fighting against a tide of deception. In the boardroom of my company, the atmosphere was tense. Loyal employees rallied behind me, but uncertainty hung in the air. Contracts were at risk, partnerships fragile. Marcus's machinations had damaged our reputation. Rebuilding trust required careful maneuvering. Behind closed doors, Marcus grew reckless. His desperation led to mistakes, missteps that I quietly recorded, storing them away for the right moment. His arrogance blinded him, and it was my advantage. One breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former associate of Marcus, disillusioned and eager to make amends, provided insider information on the financial operations and secret deals. This intel revealed the full extent of the embezzlement, enough to trigger federal investigations. With this, the pressure on Serena and Marcus escalated. The Harrisons scrambled to contain the fallout, but the cracks were widening. Amidst this, I faced my own inner battles. The betrayal cut deeper than wounds seen or heard. I wrestled with anger, grief, and the bitter sting of lost trust. Therapy helped. Quiet sessions where I confronted my pain and forged the strength to carry on. One night, alone in the dim light of my office, I allowed myself a moment to remember the man I once was. The soldier who faced danger with courage. The father who dreamed of a peaceful future. That man was still here, beneath the layers of pain and strategy. The final phase of my plan was taking shape. The evidence, allies, and public interest aligned like pieces on a chessboard. Soon, the truth would no longer be hidden in shadows. But I knew the fight was far from over. Serena and Marcus would not go quietly. The coming days would test every ounce of my resilience and cunning. Yet I was ready. For my children. For justice. For the life I refused to lose. The morning air was crisp, but inside my bones, there was a chill that no sunlight could thaw. The war I was waging was no longer about simply reclaiming what was mine. It was about exposing the rot beneath a family's polished veneer, a rot so deep it threatened to consume everything I held dear. Serena and Marcus had underestimated the power of truth. They believed their web of lies was impenetrable, that money and influence could shield them from consequence. But I had spent years learning how to navigate darkness, how to wield patience and precision as weapons. The dossier I held was thick, thousands of pages documenting deceit, corruption, and betrayal. It contained the story of a man who had been stripped of his name, his children, his legacy, and yet refused to be silenced. Every day, the battlefront shifted. Legal teams exchanged blistering accusations. Private investigators trailed every move, capturing meetings, transactions, and whispered conspiracies. Media outlets, tipped off by anonymous sources, began peeling back layers of the Harrison family's carefully constructed public image. I became a ghost in my own life, orchestrating moves from behind the scenes while maintaining a facade of control in public. Each interaction was a calculation, every word measured. The stakes were higher than ever. My children were my sanctuary and my vulnerability. Olivia and Mason, too young to grasp the full scope of the conflict, were nonetheless caught in its crossfire. I fought fiercely to protect their innocence, arranging for counselors and guardians to support them through the upheaval. But the battle was personal as well as professional. The sting of Serena's betrayal lingered like a shadow, a wound that no evidence could fully heal. I grappled with memories of trust shattered, dreams deferred, and a life rewritten by treachery. One evening, as rain pounded the windows of my study, a secure call came through. It was from the federal prosecutor's office. The sealed court documents implicating Patricia Harrison in judicial corruption were now the focus of a full-scale investigation. The scales were tipping, but with progress came peril. Marcus's desperation grew. His once calculated moves turned reckless, exposing vulnerabilities I seized upon. A secret deal gone awry, a concealed asset revealed, a confidant turning traitor. All signs that their empire was fracturing. Yet they fought back fiercely. Serena ramped up a smear campaign, painting me as unstable, dangerous. The media circus threatened to overshadow the truth I was struggling to reveal. In the quiet moments, I questioned how this had come to pass. How the man who dedicated his life to protection found himself so thoroughly betrayed. But doubts were luxuries I could not afford. The custody battle loomed large. The courtroom was a battlefield where truth and lies clashed with devastating consequences. Serena's legal team wielded every tactic, but my preparation was thorough. Witnesses came forward, documents were scrutinized, and the judge, unlike Patricia Harrison, was impartial. Throughout the trial, I remained composed. My love for Olivia and Mason was my armor. Every moment in that courtroom was a declaration. I would not be erased. Outside the court, my company's recovery continued. Employees rallied, clients returned. The tide was turning, but the cost was steep. One night, as I reviewed the latest financial audit, I received an anonymous package. Inside was a single photograph, a candid shot of Serena and Marcus meeting with an unknown figure in a dimly lit parking garage. The implications were chilling. Someone close to them was making deals in the shadows, possibly even criminal. I forwarded the photo to my contacts in law enforcement. The investigation deepened. The pressure was immense, but so was my determination. I wasn't just fighting for settlement or custody. I was fighting for justice, for truth, for the future of my children. And in that fight, I found a new strength, a fierce resolve born not of vengeance, but of love. As the courtroom drama reached its climax, and the public eye sharpened its focus on Harrison's, I knew one thing for certain. This battle was far from over, but I was ready. The tension in the air was palpable, like the moment just before a storm breaks loose. Every step I took seemed shadowed by the consequences of the war Serena and Marcus had waged against me. The man I once trusted above all else, the life I had carefully built, and the children I swore to protect were all under siege. But I was no longer the man who'd walked into this trap unarmed. Every betrayal, every lie had forged a new steel within me. Unbreakable, relentless, focused. I had become the strategist of my own salvation. The courtroom battle had dragged on, a grueling marathon where every detail was scrutinized, every motive dissected. Serena's team was aggressive, painting me as unstable and dangerous, exploiting every shadow of doubt they could manufacture. But my evidence was bulletproof. Testimonies from friends, family, therapists, financial audits, and damning proof of their collusion. I watched Olivia and Mason from afar during the proceedings. Their innocent faces held a quiet strength, a reminder why this fight was worth every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. I vowed that no matter what, they would never feel abandoned or erased. Behind the courtroom, the investigation into the Harrisons intensified. Federal agents pursued leads that connected political influence to judicial corruption. The sealed documents I had uncovered were finally unraveling the carefully guarded secrets. Marcus's empire was crumbling under the weight of truth, but as their walls fell, their desperation grew. One evening, after a late meeting, I found my car's tires slashed and a threatening note pinned beneath the windshield wiper. Last warning. Back off. Fear lingered, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, it fueled my resolve. Security was tightened. I moved my family to a safer location temporarily. Every move was calculated, every contact vetted. The public spectacle was brutal. Tabloids splashed headlines, accusing me of everything from mental instability to criminal activity. It was a smear campaign designed to break me. But the truth had a way of surfacing. A breakthrough came when a key witness, a former Harrison confidant, agreed to testify about the family's manipulation and cover-ups. Her courage under pressure was a beacon amid the storm. In court, the tide began to turn. Each revelation chipped away at Serena's case, exposing the lengths she had gone to sever my bond with my children and claim my fortune. The custody hearing became more than a legal proceeding. It was a battle for justice, for truth, and for family. Outside, my company rallied. Employees, clients, and even former rivals stood by me. The damage Marcus had inflicted was real, but with transparency and hard work, we began to rebuild trust. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. Serena and Marcus, sensing defeat, tried to strike a desperate deal, offering to settle custody and financial disputes quietly in exchange for silence. I refused. Compromise meant surrender, and I was fighting for everything. The courtroom drama culminated in a decisive ruling. custody granted in my favor, financial settlements adjusted to reflect the true state of affairs, and the Harrisons' reputation shattered by federal investigations. For a moment, silence, then relief. But even in victory, scars remained. The betrayal had changed me, altered the landscape of my life forever. Yet, amidst the ruins, there was hope for Olivia and Mason, for the legacy I would rebuild, and for the truth that had finally prevailed. I close this chapter of my life not with bitterness, but with resolve. Because the greatest battles aren't just won in courts or boardrooms. They are won in the heart, and mine was unbroken. The weeks that followed were a relentless test of endurance, patience, and strength. Every day brought a new challenge. Legal hurdles, public scrutiny, and the ever-looming threat of retaliation from Serena and Marcus. But beneath it all, a steady undercurrent of hope pulsed through me. I could feel the tide shifting. The truth was no longer a whisper. It was roaring louder with every passing moment. I'd become a man reborn through fire. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy me had instead forged an unbreakable resolve. I was fighting not just for survival, but for justice, for redemption, and most importantly, for my children. Olivia and Mason had endured more than any child should. Yet their resilience was astonishing. I spent every possible moment with them, soaking in their laughter, their questions, their innocence. They were my compass in a world turned upside down, and I vowed to shield them from the storm, no matter the cost. Serena's smears grew increasingly vicious. She wielded every lie and manipulation in her arsenal, painting me as unstable, reckless, even dangerous. But the foundation of my case was strong, unassailable proof of her deceit, financial manipulations, and the corrupt influence of the Harrison family. Behind the scenes, federal investigators were closing in. The sealed court documents and financial trails we uncovered exposed a tangled web of corruption that went beyond anything I had imagined. Patricia Harrison's judicial misconduct was just the tip of the iceberg. Campaign donations, backdoor deals, and the suppression of inconvenient truths were now the focus of intense scrutiny. Marcus's empire began to crumble as more insiders turned whistleblower, drawn by the promise of immunity or a conscience awakened too late. Their testimonies were damning, adding layers of credibility to my claims and weakening Serena's position. Still, the battle was far from over. Every move I made was met with counterattacks. Threats escalated. One night, a brick shattered my study window, a clear message that the war had turned personal. I tightened security around my home and invested in surveillance that left no blind spots. The custody hearing was grueling. Serena's lawyers fought fiercely, weaponizing every detail of my life. My past military service, my long work hours, even moments of emotional vulnerability. But I held firm, presenting evidence of my unwavering commitment to Olivia and Mason, highlighting Serena's manipulations and neglect. Witnesses I'd painstakingly prepared spoke with clarity and conviction. Counselors testified the emotional toll on the children caused by Serena's actions. Friends and colleagues painted a picture of a devoted father battling an orchestrated campaign to erase him. As the judge listened, I saw glimpses of understanding. The scales of justice, long tipped by power and influence, began to balance. Public opinion also turned. The story of betrayal, corruption, and resilience struck a chord. Support poured in, not just from those who knew me, but from strangers moved by the truth and the fight for family. One evening, as I sat alone reviewing the latest evidence, my phone buzzed with a secure message. It was from the lead federal investigator. A breakthrough. A crucial piece of evidence had been uncovered, linking Marcus directly to illegal campaign contributions and the suppression of evidence in the Moretti case. This was the final piece. With it, the Harrisons' walls crumbled faster than anticipated. Serena's veneer of control cracked. Reports emerged of heated confrontations, desperate attempts to salvage what remained. The family's public image unraveled amid scandal and indictments. Finally, the day came when the court delivered its verdict. Custody was awarded to me, with a comprehensive visitation plan, ensuring Olivia and Mason's safety and well-being. Financial settlements were adjusted to reflect the true extent of Marcus's embezzlement and Serena's deceit. But more than that, justice was served. The federal investigations led to resignations, indictments, and a reckoning for the Harrisons. In the quiet aftermath, I allowed myself to breathe, to feel the weight of everything I'd endured and overcome. The fight had cost me dearly. Relationships broken, trust shattered, a life forever changed. But through it all, I had won. Not just a legal battle, but a battle for truth, for family, and for my own integrity. Looking into Olivia and Mason's eyes, I knew that the future was ours to build. A future free from lies and betrayal. And for the first time in years, I felt hope. The air in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. Every breath held in silent witness to a reckoning years in the making. As I sat, the weight of what brought me here pressed down like a tidal wave, but beneath it lay a calm, a resolve as steady and unyielding as steel. This wasn't just a trial. It was a final act of a story that had begun with betrayal. Betrayal so profound it threatened to erase me from existence. I was Ethan Drake, a man who had built his life from the ashes of hardship, who had loved, lost, and fought with every fiber of his being. The betrayal of my wife Serena and my once close friend Marcus wasn't just a personal wound. It was an assault on my very identity. They had plotted to steal my children, my fortune, my name, but I had turned their game into my battlefield. The gallery was packed with faces, some familiar, some strangers, but all here to witness the truth unfold. My children, Olivia and Mason, sat quietly beside their guardian, their eyes wide with curiosity and hope. Protecting them had become my North Star through every dark night and every challenge. The judge entered, her presence commanding silence. The moment had arrived. Over the weeks leading up to this day, every piece of evidence I had painstakingly gathered was laid bare. The corrupt judicial dealings of Patricia Harrison, the financial fraud Marcus had orchestrated, Serena's manipulations to alienate me from my own family, all exposed in painstaking detail. Federal investigators had joined the process, their relentless pursuit of truth reinforcing the case beyond reasonable doubt. The testimony of former insiders, the damning documents, and the irrefutable surveillance footage I had obtained spoke louder than words. It was a narrative of greed, power, and deceit, one that had tried to bury the truth beneath layers of lies. Serena's defense faltered under the weight of evidence. Her attempt to paint me as unstable crumbled in the face of witness, accounts describing my unwavering dedication as a father and emotional turmoil my children endured at her hands. Marcus's silence was deafening. His empire collapsed, piece by piece. In the closing moments, the judge's voice echoed through the chamber. Based on the evidence presented in the welfare of the children, the court grants full custody of Olivia and Mason to Mr. Ethan Drake. The financial settlement shall be adjusted to reflect the true assets and damages incurred. Relief flooded through me like a cleansing storm. Years of pain, fear, and uncertainty were distilled into this moment of victory. But victory was more than a legal judgment. It was a reclaiming of my life. As the courtroom emptied, Olivia ran into my arms, Mason trailing behind, his small hand clutching mine. Their smiles, pure, untainted, were the balm to my weary soul. The journey ahead would not be without challenges, but now, the path was clear. We would rebuild, together, outside. The media buzzed with headlines exposing the Harrison family's corruption and Marcus's criminal activities. The federal investigation led to resignations, indictments, and a reckoning that rippled through the city's elite. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the suffocating weight of betrayal. At home, walls that once echoed with silence now resonated with laughter. Olivia and Mason thrived, surrounded by love and security. The past could not be undone, but it no longer defined us. I found peace not in vengeance, but in justice served and in the unwavering bond of family. Looking back, I realized that the greatest battles we face are not just fought against others, but within ourselves. I emerged from the ashes not broken, but forged anew. This is my story, not just a betrayal, but a resilient strategy and ultimately redemption. And as I look forward, I know this fight has only made me stronger. For my children, for truth, and for the man I have become.